everyone. Qué bueno que están aquí. Howdy. I'm Tanner. And I have a question. What is the greatest gift you've ever received? While you think about that, I want you to imagine a school in the Netherlands, right? You're learning Dutch, German, French. Seems like a pretty good start. Now, move to the US and rip all that away and speak only English. That's my start. I lost basically everything, except for a few Dutch words and a song about milk. Maybe not the most useful. I began learning Spanish in a summer school, where I learned two more things. I learned penguin, penguino, and tuxedo, tuxedo. Again, maybe not the most useful vocabulary to learn, unless you are at some penguin ball, but I haven't attended one yet. All of this to say that I was not a talented language learner by any means. I used to hate grammar, hated English grammar, and it wasn't until a Spanish class at middle school that I quickly grew to love Spanish grammar, which may have had something to do with an attractive Spanish teacher, but that's beside the point. I didn't know it then, but Spanish would become one of the greatest gifts in my life. And why? Because Spanish, and truthfully all languages that I've studied, have brought me more experiences, more friendships, and more opportunities than anything else. So that's why it's the greatest for me. Today, I want to share with you 4 things. Why we should learn a language, a new metaphor for learning, the advantage that bilinguals have, and last, my favorite vocabulary tip. So how easy is it? Or why? Why should we learn a language? Sorry. Well, as of 2017, there were 257 million migrants worldwide and 433,000 in the Czech Republic alone. So, what does that tell us? The opportunity is there, people are traveling, there's no excuse. You don't even have to go far because people are coming to you. So there are plenty of opportunities. On top of that, technology is progressing faster than ever. With AI, text-to-speech, instant translation, seems pretty good. Is there some problem with this? I think the prevalence of these instant translations, apps that help out are great, but I think they remove the motivation to learn a foreign language when you can simply translate one. And I think you miss out on a lot of great things when you do that. You miss out on increased work opportunities, increased opportunities for relationships, travel, money, which is great, and more importantly, you miss out on some of the cognitive benefits of bilingualism. Bilingualism has been shown to delay the onset of Alzheimer's up to 7 years. Bilinguals are found to have improved judgment, better problem solving, larger working memories, increased executive function in the brain, and most importantly for language learning, an increased metalinguistic awareness, which I will explain in a little bit. I want to talk about how easy is it to learn. According to the Foreign Service Institute, for a native English speaker, there are 5 categories of languages. Category 1 languages, fairly similar to English, usually require a little bit less time to learn, all the way to Category 5 languages, where you have to learn some new script, new writing system, learn to read. Those are generally the toughest for native English speakers. Czech, right in Category 4, with a ton of other languages. Here are the other Category 4 languages. Takes about 1,100 hours to learn. Though I think this time estimate is a little blown out of proportion if we're realistic about our goals. For me, I don't want to speak Czech perfectly, fluently, no mistakes, like you mistake me for a native. I just want to communicate and make friends and eat and, travel, some important things. So I think it takes considerably less time than that. If you heard me trying to repair some car in Czech, you'd probably think, this guy, what's he know? But if you heard me at Burrito Loco, native. You see, learning a language is like learning to ride a bike. And each language you want to learn or have is like a wheel. So what are some of the fears we have with learning to ride a bike? Maybe you're afraid you won't ever learn to ride, you'll never learn the language. Maybe the bike looks different, has different parts, it sounds different. Maybe the language has different grammar, different sounds, etc. But I have good news. We are all skilled unicyclists because we are all native speakers of at least one language. Have you ever seen a bad unicyclist? I haven't. People either ride the unicycle or they don't. I think some magic happens in the middle. I've never seen a bad unicyclist. Likewise, people are either native or they're not native. And the key is just to add a wheel. Now this relies a lot on two things in linguistics: language transfer and markedness. Language transfer is essentially when you take all the sounds, all the grammar of your native language and just throw that onto whatever you're trying to learn. And sometimes it's positive, where things line up and lead you to less mistakes. And sometimes it's negative and it messes you up and you say the wrong things. That's negative transfer. Markedness is simply how distinctly different something is in a language. So for instance, in English we have the verb run, I run, you run, they run. This is an unmarked form. The third person runs with the S is now a marked form, and unsurprisingly, is a little more difficult to learn than the unmarked form. Similarly, grammar can be marked. For instance, Czech case declension for a native English speaker is highly marked and is a huge pain to learn. On the other side, Czech doesn't have the use of articles quite like English does, and so when you're teaching a native Czech person, generally they struggle with the articles as well, because it just doesn't transfer, and those are highly marked forms. So let's look at the bike parts we have for positive transfer: sounds, grammar, and vocab. We'll start with sounds. As I said, I'm a native English speaker. So here in the International Phonetic Alphabet, I have the sounds of English and the sounds of Czech that are shared, b, d, f, g, h, y, and some of the unique sounds. And as you can see, Czech has 9 unique sounds. That fourth one, the R with the little T under it, that's that j sound that I'm sure I butchered. So right now, as a native English speaker, I would have to learn 9 new sounds, which is pretty scary. But quick show of hands, how many of you consider yourselves bilingual or multilingual to some extent? Excellent. Because you actually have an advantage. You're not unicyclists, you're bicyclists. There's more material for you to have to experience positive transfer with. I mentioned increased metalinguistic awareness earlier. What that basically means is, as a bilingual or a trilingual, whichever, you have an increased awareness. You know more about what's possible in a language, more about what's possible in terms of grammar, how things can be organized, whereas a monolingual only knows the one way, and so learning anything different from that is a huge task. So bilinguals have a little bit of an advantage. I did some research at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, comparing bilinguals and monolinguals as they learned their next foreign language. Bilinguals, you can see, are in blue, and I found that bilinguals used a couple different strategies differently than monolinguals. For instance, they use memory, cognitive, compensation, and affective strategies to a greater degree than monolinguals did. Other studies find that across the board, bilinguals use more. I won't get into what these strategies are, but I want to show you how this has helped me as I've approached other languages. So, for instance, our first wheel, English, we'll use Spanish as the other wheel, and German for the third wheel, and we'll see how that helps me as I learn Czech. So here we have the 9 unique Czech sounds. Scary, I don't want to learn it. It's a good thing I've spent a ton of time studying Spanish, and I've been exposed to those 3 sounds, which are also in Czech, so that knocks it down to only 6 new sounds. In German, the "t" also knocks it down 1 more, leaving us with 5 sounds as a native English speaker. And I don't know about you, but if I have less to learn, sounds pretty good. I like that. 5 is a lot less scarier than 9. Likewise, grammar. There are 2 issues that native English speakers often have when learning a new language. It's issues with case and with grammatical gender. English has 3 cases, but you don't see it in the language quite like something like Czech, which has 7. So that is a nightmare to learn as a native English speaker, especially if you've never been exposed to what case is and how it works in a language, what it does. So it's a good thing if you've studied some other language like German, which can act as a stepping stone, where you learn what case is, how it works in a language, what it can do, and it makes something like Czech a lot less scary when you jump to that. You're not going 0 to 7, you're going 0 to 4 and 7, which also, I'll take that over 0 to 7. I mentioned grammatical gender. English does not use grammatical gender. Czech has 4 distinctions in terms of feminine, neuter, masculine, animate, and inanimate. There are languages with even more than that. But again, going 0 to 4 is kind of like going 0 to 100 real quick. But having something in the middle, like Spanish or Arabic and German with 2 or 3 genders, makes that transition a little nicer, where in those languages you can learn, oh, this makes sense. Things are categorized, it doesn't necessarily mean by its gender. Things have to agree, so a language that doesn't exist can be tough at first. The third thing I want to tell you is my vocabulary tip. I mentioned that the most important things to learn are the least marked, because they're easiest, and they're more likely to have positive transfer where it lines up. So naturally, the vocabulary tip I have is for what's most likely to transfer when you're learning a language, and the least marked forms, which are cognates. I love cognates. They're in all languages, and there are some really useful words like plan, radio, problem, restaurant, you name it. Tons of useful words that are basically freebies when you're learning a language, especially at the beginning. Sometimes they can be super useful, sometimes they can be strange. I think the first Czech adjective I learned was bizarní, or bizarre, which is a unique word, but it's great if you can use it. And just to show you even more that they're across all languages, I have 3 different language families: Germanic with English, Romance, and Arabic. Again, some super useful words: coffee, cafe, kahwa, alcohol. Again, things we use on a weekly basis. Super important. Also, if we look at elixir, that I know in Czech is also elixir. And if you're creative with your use of these words, it can give you some good memories, and it helps you out in different situations. I was at the gym with my Czech buddy, and he had a protein shake, and I don't know how to say shake in Czech, so I was like, máš bilkovany elixir. And he kind of looked at me weird, but he knew what I was saying. You do have to be careful, because it does not always work this way. I once was in a Spanish class, and I had the task to be in front talking about my favorite activity, which at the time was mountain climbing, rock climbing. So I went in front of the class, and I began speaking, and I said, "Me gusta escalar montañas sin ropa." Ropa, definitely, nailed it, great. Until I looked around, and my classmates were like, and my teacher let me know that ropa means clothes. So I said, I like to climb mountains naked, which I don't. But from that moment on, I never made that mistake again, and it sticks with me still today. So you do have to be careful sometimes. So I've made a list of some Czech and English words that you might want to look out for. I'll let you look at those. definitely have to be careful with some words when you're using cognates. I want to leave you with this. There has never been a better time to learn a language. The distances have never been shorter, the prices never cheaper. People have regretted not learning a language, but nobody that I know has ever regretted learning one. So use those bite parts I mentioned, the grammar, the vocab, the sounds, to the best of your ability, and use them as much as they can in terms of positive transfer to really support your learning and remove the fear of learning a new language. And be prepared to have the cultural in, so to speak, because I've never met a native speaker who is upset that you're trying to use something so important to their culture as their language. I think it fosters friendships, brings great experiences, and makes people feel more comfortable, even if you tell them you climb mountains naked. So with that, don't stop at bilingual, don't stop at trilingual, don't stop building these relationships and having these experiences. And with that, Digimos, danke, shukran, thank you,